Hello, I'm Kent Comfort with Center for Health and Information Policy, known as CHIP, and we are doing a series with Joe Sopcich about his experience with his family in a nursing home facility, a senior care facility that is quite an amazing story. And this is going to be the second segment of what happened in Joe's family's experience and with his, in this case, his mother. So I'm going to invite Joe to join us now and uh, continue the story that we started in the previous segment. Hello, Joe.
Hi,
Uh,
Kent.
Glad to
Thanks
have
for
you
this
back again.
opportunity.
You bet. Glad to have you back again. Go right ahead. You probably recall where you left off with your mother's circumstance. I think we were in the month of April, if I recall right. So please continue.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was in April when that happened. The COVID, the isolation, the dehydration, that all occurred in April. And then over the next couple of weeks, Mom she kind of came back. I mean, little by little, um, she was returning to some degree of what she was before that incident. May rolls around, and it was one of those unusually warm days in May. And so it's the type of thing where people kind of started wishing they had their air conditioners on. And Mom was back in her room. In fact, immediately after the dehydration issue, they moved her back into her room, which I could never figure out if she had COVID, why that decision could be made so quickly. But they did. She was back in her room. And as I would normally do, I would get there anywhere around 4 o'clock to 4:30 in the afternoon and stay through dinner until she went to bed. And so this day, I arrived and I noticed her door was closed. Now, supposedly they had this rule where doors were never supposed to be closed. So someone could always see what was going on inside, or somebody be able to call for help or something outside. But her door was closed. And so I walked to the door, knocked, maybe they were changing her or something. I got no response. And so I went inside and I was stunned, shocked, uh, to walk into a room that had to be at least 90 to 95 degrees. It was unbearably hot. My mother was in her bed. She was writhing around and moaning. Her nightgown was up above her waist. She had her diapers on. It was a pathetic sight to see. Um, the first thing I did, though, was I literally ran to the director's office and told him he had to come see here. Now, this wasn't the facility director, this was this wing director. And I said, you got to come down and see this because I was in his office frequently expressing my points of view on the quality of care or lack of quality of care. I bring him down there and I say, okay, this is what we're paying $400 a day for, and open the door. And he went in and he was shocked, of course, kind of stunned. I videoed the whole episode. My mom here, and this guy trying to run around and figure out how to turn the heat off. He couldn't even figure out how to manage the thermostat in this room. You had a thermostat and you had a unit underneath the window that kicked out cold air or warm air, depending upon the season. He couldn't figure it out. Nobody could figure out how to turn the thermostat off. Now the maintenance guys are coming in trying to figure it out. And I'm hearing them talk about, oh, this unit's been here for 8 years, 7, 8 years. Nobody's ever done anything about it. Besides making their comments how hot it was. And so, finally, and by now the nurses are in there. It's a big deal. Trying to get everything settled down with my mom and trying to turn off this stuff. Literally within minutes, they're pulling up this gigantic unit, a new one, or at least a more current one, and yanked out the old one and put in the new one. And God knows what they did with the thermostat, but then cold air started coming out, right? Meanwhile, my mom has just been through this weird, this kind of through hell. And of course, she doesn't really know what's going on. I mean, it's so sad. And so I figured, based on the video that we had of this, because we had the video cameras in there, we saw that a worker, and I believe probably a third party person they hire from the outside, And they hire people from the outside to come in and provide this service for all the reasons that everybody else does, because you don't have benefits. They're easier to hire and fire and all this kind of stuff. But yet the problem with that, they're totally unfamiliar with the facility. This person tries to get the thermostat to work, doesn't have a clue, and leaves it. She thinks she's got it set right, and then walks out and closes the door. Now, that's about 8 in the morning. And so here's my mom. The heat comes by 10 o'clock, it's pretty doggone hot in there, and the maintenance guys come in and they go, this is no kidding. This is 1 billion degrees in here. And they walk by my mom, hi, Levon, and try to figure it out. And then my mom's withering on the bed, moaning and stuff. And they say, bye, Levon, and walk out the door, leaving her there and close the door. This goes on. Mom is left in that facility, left in that room all on her own, and the heat is climbing. It had to be over 95 degrees, 90 degrees when I got in there. I had mentioned several weeks prior to that to a staff member about, hey, I think that thermostat's not working right, because I was messing with it one day and I couldn't figure it out. It's kind of incredible. I mean, you're paying, again, over $400 a day. You can go to a Motel 6 and pay 20 bucks a night and have a better thermostat. And they never fixed it, obviously. That was the type of thing, a situation, the type of care that my mother had to endure. And, that happened on May 12th. My mom died, I believe, on May 18th. She died soon after that. It was so unnecessary for her to experience that kind of torment before she passed away. And I keep making, oh, sorry, Kent.
That's an understatement. That's an important statement. I'm wondering, was that the only room for this kind of problem? No. So imagine if you hadn't been there again. I've brought that up before, and not only that, what if there had been a lot of Joe's and Stacy's instead of just you guys throughout the facility? Do you think that might have had a significant impact on raising the bar, so to speak, in terms of the level of care?
I gotta say, based on our experience, nobody stepped foot in that room for almost all day, most of the day. And she was left totally on her own. But when you have like one person trying to cover at least 20 beds, those types of things are going to happen. Now, whether or not it's happening in memory care, this was acute care, or assisted living, that remains to be seen. You're kind of confined to that one small space, that one little room, as well as the pod. I mean, what you would see is that in the evenings, before and after dinner, they would wheel everyone out in their wheelchairs. Most of them couldn't talk or communicate, and park them in a semicircle in front of the TV, so they could just sit there. I probably watched more Hallmark movies during my times going in there than I had my entire life put together. But and maybe that's standard for care facilities. I don't know. It shouldn't have been standard for this place, but that's how it worked. And so my thing, and of course, my wife Stacy and my sisters Kathy and Cindy, to know that our mother, despite our best efforts, had her final days, living, had to endure those types of situations. It's a horrible feeling. You kind of have this sense of failure, and you have to understand that maybe we could have been there 24/7, but ultimately it's the fault of the system itself.
Well, it's exactly. It's certainly failure is in this story, but it wasn't you guys. You went beyond the call, and you were in a fortunate situation to be able to do some things that an awful lot of families just simply can't do. And I think that's an important point to make as well.
Kent, that's why I'm talking to you now, because if it's happening in a facility like this, if this type of institutionalized abuse is happening in a facility with this standing and this appearance, what must be going on in those facilities that are least or less resourced? I can't even begin to imagine that.
You're exactly right, and Chip is working very hard to disclose that and and publicize that as much as possible. Let's also help our viewers and listeners remember that the death rate in nursing homes through COVID was off the clock. I mean, it was incredible. In fact, you could almost say uh, many of us, if not most of us, had a family member or somebody we know who, when they were in a facility like this, they died from having COVID because the conditions, as you described in the previous session, where the employees were not required to be vaccinated, even though the residents were, was just a wide open opportunity for something like this to occur.
Yeah, this place would publish in their newsletter the number of COVID deaths. And it would usually be like 1 or 0. And we had a staff member kind of roll their eyes when I brought that up. Eventually, they stopped. I believe they even stopped providing that kind of information. So there's no way it couldn't have been more severe than that. That's my belief.
I think you're exactly right. And do you have any other final thoughts here for this particular session on this?
Yeah, Ken, I think that what I experienced, what my mother experienced, my sisters and Stacy and all, I think these types of things happen more than people realize. And they happen more than people realize, and regardless of the apparent quality of the facility. And it's not a knock on the people who work there. I had so much admiration for some of the caregivers, but it's a knock on the management. It's a knock on the ownership that enables this type of stuff to go on under the charade that they're providing. Their mission is to provide care when it's actually to provide profit for the people who, or corporations or private equity companies that own it. And that is the thought, that is my thought on all of this. And I believe I'd give anything not to have to be or feeling compelled to share these stories with you now.
That's very, very well stated. I think that's a very good way to bring this particular session to a close. And I want to thank you again for being willing to share this story.
Thank you, Kent. Look forward to the next one.